Hey there, we have 3 disturbing stories for you today. Grab a cup of hot cocoa and join me in this truly disturbing and enthralling stories. This story took place in the late 1980s. We lived in a backwater village. Our house was on the border of that village, after which there was a vast sugarcane field and no more houses. Further north, there was a mountainous terrain which hid the open-air crematorium and offered privacy to the mourners. And most importantly, the hills blocked the smoke from flowing into the village by the incoming sea breeze. When there was a funeral, the processions passed in front of my house, making its way to crematorium behind the hills. The deceased were traditionally wrapped in a white sheet and laid on a bamboo stretcher, which was carried by family and friends over their shoulders from the family home to the crematorium, chanting Ram Nam, Satya Hai as the last rites. Since we moved into the village, I was often woken up in the middle of the night by the loud, mournful howling of dogs. I can hear the howling coming from different directions as they gather in one place, and as a group continue down the road, howling mournfully as if following something. They would start somewhere outside the village and enter the village howling down the road in the dead of the night. The sound was awful, and I would bury my head under the blanket until they were gone. A few years later, I noticed the coincidence that on the night these dogs howled, there was coincidentally a funeral that day. They never behaved like this during the day. The locals were very superstitious, religious, and most believed in black magic and voodoo. To give you a better understanding of the culture and people's mindset, some people would rather get a voodooist to heal someone who is unwell, or if doctors were unable to treat that person, they turned to prayer or voodoo. The climate at home was volatile, to say the least. We did not know when my mom was going to have one of her violent outbursts. I knew she was not well and was glad my dad was there to hold everything together. We had the voodooist come a few times to the house to tend to my mom. I do not know exactly what happened. My dad made sure to keep us away and did not tell us anything to not scare us. One night, something woke me up. It was still dark outside. Puzzled, I looked over at my sister, who was still fast asleep, and I turned over, trying to go back to sleep when I heard it. It was faint, but it sounded like footsteps. I went into the corridor and listened. The sound was clearer. It was coming from the stairwell. Standing at the top of the stairs, I saw my mom walking down slowly. I was about to call out to her to ask if she was okay, but froze when I saw the knife in her hand. I silently followed her and wondered if she was sleepwalking. Waking up a sleepwalker can make them violent, and there was no telling how she was going to react with a knife in her hand. She made her way to the living room, and I realized with horror my dad was fast asleep on the sofa. He had fallen asleep watching TV. She stopped next to him, watching him sleep for a moment before she lifted the knife above her head. Without hesitating, I jumped onto the coffee table and grabbed the knife, screaming for my dad to wake up. Next thing I knew, the knife was pried out of her hand, and Dad told me to take it away while holding my erratic mom tightly against him. My sister was standing breathlessly at the door, trying to understand what just happened. I was about to explain that Mom was sleepwalking when Dad screamed in pain. Mom's head was against his neck, and he was trying to get her off him. He grabbed her hair and shoved her off him. Blood was gushing out where she had bitten him on the neck. Dad took off his t-shirt and pressed it against his neck, trying not to show how much pain he was in. My sister and I restrained Mom, and it took the both of us to tie her down on a chair. She was hissing, saying what she was going to do to our face in graphic details, and laughed at our shocked expressions. Dad had called the authorities, and he needed an ambulance. intense. Luckily, the wound on his neck was not deep, and the bleeding had slowed down. After Mom was admitted for psychiatric evaluation, they concluded that she was suffering from schizophrenia. The signs were there. Instead of treating her, the family brought voodooists to help her. We had seen her talking to herself over the years, and Dad would say, "Oh, it was Mom being Mom. Just a quirk." She came back after a year's treatment at the psychiatric ward. She was back to her old self, minus the talking to imaginary things or hearing voices. The meds made her lethargic, but she looked healthier. It took her nearly killing someone before she was given the proper help she needed. I am glad I woke up that night when I did. A few minutes later, both my sisters and my life would have been irreparably changed. Please do not ignore signs of mental illness. Pride or saving face has no place in mental illness. With proper treatment, people can have long and productive lives. When I was 16, I had a part-time job as a cashier at a local restaurant. After classes, I had the late shifts, 3 weeknights and weekends. The owners allowed me to do my homework behind the counter when it was not busy. After my shift, I waited for the 11:30 bus across the street, and I was usually home in about 15 minutes, since there was no traffic at that time of the night. Both my parents died in a car crash 2 years ago after a drunk driver ran a red light, leaving me and my sister orphans. My sister had just turned 18 that year and chose to be my guardian. We both attended classes and worked part-time. My sister, Bella, had it all figured out. With the small savings our parents left us, we could both attend university if we both worked part-time and saved up. We had no extended families. My mom grew up in foster care, and my dad was an only child with a surviving grandparent in a care home. If Bella had not taken me under her wings, I was going to become the ward of the state. It was raining heavily that night. I did not have an umbrella, and with water running down my glasses, I could barely see a thing. As soon as I got on the bus, the warmth inside steamed up my glasses. I took them off and gingerly found a seat, desperately trying to wipe my glasses down. I was hopeless without them. Somehow, I missed my bus stop and watched as we went past my house. I now had a 10 minutes walk in the rain to get back home. When I got off, I mentally braced myself against the wind and rain and speed walked home. I could barely see anything and just focused on walking as fast as I could. The street was deserted, and I did not come across anyone. I took out my keys as I got closer to home and rushed to let myself in. The house was 2-story with a short walk from the street to the door. As I got in, I threw my school bag on the floor and shook the water from my jacket when someone shoved me inside the house and slammed the door shut. I fell on the floor, and still as blind as a bat, I struggled to understand what was happening. A hand grabbed my shirt, pulled me up, and shoved me against the wall. It was Ryan, my sister's ex. "Where are you keeping it?" he growled. "Keeping what?" I asked, confused and scared. He punched the wall and screamed, "The money." My sister was not home yet, and he knew it. Her car was not parked outside. I told him my sister handled the money, and I had no idea. He dragged me to the living room and told me to sit. I knew a bit about Ryan and Bella's history. My parents were against them dating, and the more they opposed, the more Bella wanted to keep dating Ryan. Teenage rebellion, I guess. Bella got involved in substance abuse for a short while, until my parents' accident, and then she wised up. When Ryan wanted to spend the inheritance on drugs, Bella broke up and cut all contacts with him. That was 2 years ago. Ryan was pacing across the living room and looked like he was going into withdrawal. I knew a thing or two about it. I had seen Bella go through the same thing. she had been using only for a short time, or maybe because of her resolve to kick it. She was able to emerge at the other end and did not relapse again. He trashed the living room looking for valuables to pawn. My dad's office was down the hall, and it had a lock on it. When I got the opportunity, I ran as fast as I could and slammed shut and locked the door just as Ryan threw his full weight against it. I speed-dialed Bella and warned her to not come home and explained the whole situation. She was just pulling up at the house and asked me to climb out of the window. Ryan was still trying to break down the door, and it looked like it was going to give at any minute. I climbed out of the window and ran around the side of the house to where Bella was parked. She drove off as soon as I was safely in the car. I dialed 911 and asked for the police. They arrived within minutes. Ryan hadn't left when they arrived. He had ransacked my dad's office and shot at the officers when they entered the property. He was shot during the standoff and taken into custody. The withdrawal had made him desperate for a fix. He was unable to think rationally. The next-door neighbor's cameras had caught him following me home and running up the footpath as soon as I had opened the door. Turned out Ryan had seen me on the bus and had decided to follow me home. He told the police officers it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. He needed money, and he knew Bella had inherited enough to cover him for a few months. Bella and I were lucky that night. I don't even want to imagine what could have happened if things had turned out differently. The weekly food shopping was usually ordered online for home delivery, but with a month-old baby and my mom brain, I forgot to complete and process the payment on the online shopping cart. There was no food in the house to feed the kids, so I had to pull up my big girl pants and go to the supermarket. After preparing the baby bag with milk bottles, fresh diapers, wipes, and all the good stuff a baby needed, I was ready and drove to the mall. As I parked, I could see two people going at it over a disabled parking space. What was a shopping trip if there was no one fighting over parking, right? I whispered at baby Willow. She cooed in agreement. The sun was setting, and the streetlights were turning on, casting an orangey hue over the cars and pavement. I had to hurry up. Tom and Brian, my 10 and 12-year-olds, were going to be home soon, and I needed to get dinner ready. Once Willow was safely in the stroller, I went past the two guys arguing on the street. One of them was a veteran. Let's call him Customer A, was angry with the other guy, Customer B, who he believed did not have any disability and was callous enough to steal the parking space from an actual disabled person. The argument got even more heated and louder as the veteran screamed that another disabled woman had to park her car further away and she had difficulty walking. Soon punches were flying, and other shoppers and staff intervened to defuse the situation. I did not hear the end of the disagreement as I rushed to finish my shopping. Right when I was about to head to the checkout, there was a loud pop that reverberated throughout the supermarket. I could not tell what that was. I thought a balloon had popped, but it sounded so loud. Shortly after, I heard a few more pops, and people were screaming and running in all directions. Scared, I pushed the stroller in a corner and leaned over and protected my baby from being trampled on or overturned. I realized it was a shooter, and the popping sound was a revolver being discharged. I still could not tell where the gunman was. I looked around and saw a double door, slightly ajar with a pair of eyes staring at me. It was a staff member who was trying to see what was going on and gestured for me to come towards him. He looked down the aisles and gestured for me to hurry up. There were a few more popping sounds, and I still could not tell where it was coming from. Willow was still asleep through all the commotion. She was a deep sleeper, and today I was so thankful for that. I pushed the stroller through the double door, and the staff locked it after us. The store manager was on the phone with 911, and another staff member was trying to get the loading bay shutter door to open. There was a few customers and staff members who had been fortunate enough to make it into the loading bay for shelter. They usually shut the loading bay doors if there were no more deliveries scheduled, and that was the only way out. Suddenly there was push against the door, and a woman started screaming and begging not to shoot her. Pop, pop, and there was silence. No one dared to breathe, and just then the shutter doors activated, and the mechanics made a loud buzzing sound as it lifted. There were a few police officers already waiting outside. They escorted everyone into the waiting police cars and drove us to a safe distance until the shooter was apprehended. Thanks to the store manager, the officers knew to wait for us outside and safely got everyone out of danger. The shooter was shot and killed when he refused to surrender. Turned out the shooter was one of the guys arguing over a parking spot. After staff members had gotten involved, they had sided with the veteran and requested that customer B vacate the parking space immediately, or they were going to call the police. After an investigation, it was revealed that customer B had stopped taking his medication and suffered from intermittent explosive disorder. The veteran's outburst, screaming and punching, had set in motion the event that unfolded later that evening. He had borrowed his brother's car and found the gun in the glove compartment. His brother had forgotten to remove it and did not realize his gun was used to kill 4 people and severely wounded 6 others. Among the dead was the veteran. Customer B had walked into the supermarket and shot the veteran point blank. Still not satisfied, he went on a rampage. I am still recovering from PTSD. Loud noises give me anxiety attacks, and I still have recurring nightmares. This happened a year ago. It still seems like it was yesterday. All right, that's enough nightmare fuel for one night. If you enjoyed the scare, give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. And if you're watching this before bed, good luck. Until next time, sleep tight and don't let the monsters bite.